Imagine planning the perfect climbing trip. You're experienced, you're prepared, you've got all the gear, and you're going with someone you trust completely, your own daughter. That's exactly what Garrett Beckwith did in August 2013. He was 45, an engineer, the kind of guy who checked everything 3 times. Safety wasn't just important to him, it was his religion. His 19-year-old daughter Della was right there with him, young, talented, full of life. They were heading into Wyoming's Wind River Range, aiming for the granite walls of Mount Hooker. This wasn't supposed to be their last adventure. It was supposed to be just another chapter in a story they were still writing together. But sometimes, the most meticulous plans crumble because of the smallest, most inexplicable detail. For Garrett and Della, that detail was leaving their satellite phones sitting in the glove compartment of their dusty truck, fully charged, perfectly functional, just ... sitting there. When they didn't call home at the prearranged time, that little fact didn't just raise a red flag, it shattered the entire idea of what might have happened to them. This wasn't a case of getting lost or running into bad weather. This was something else entirely. This was a mystery that started not on the mountain's deadly slopes, but right here in the cab of a pickup truck that looked like it belonged to ghosts. Marianne Beckwith, waiting at home, felt that silence creep in. First, it was just the absence of a phone call. Then, it became something heavier, something that made her stomach drop and her hands shake. She knew Garrett. She knew his systems, his redundancies, his absolute obsession with doing things the right way. A missed check-in wasn't just unusual. It was impossible, according to his own rules. When the Fremont County Sheriff's deputy finally reached the trailhead, confirmed the truck, and opened that glove compartment, he didn't just find 2 phones. He found the first piece of a puzzle that would baffle investigators for over a decade. The phones weren't broken, they weren't forgotten, they were deliberately left behind. And that single fact turned a search and rescue operation into something far more haunting. The search was massive. Helicopters swept the granite faces, ground teams combed the trails, and even Garrett's old climbing partners came out, looking for signs on the most obscure routes. But the mountain gave up nothing. No gear, no footprints, no trace. Just an indifferent silence that seemed to mock every effort. The official search was called off after just 10 days, not because they'd given up, but because the Wind River Range had simply swallowed them whole. The case went cold, settling into the kind of long-term missing person file that gathers dust in despair. For Marianne, those years weren't just hard, they were torture. The not knowing was its own kind of prison. Was Garrett alive? Was Della? Were they together? Were they suffering? The questions looped endlessly, with no answers and no end in sight. Then, for a few fleeting moments, hope flickered back to life. A hiker found a piece of climbing gear, a small metal nut, miles away from where they'd vanished. It matched Garrett's preferred brand. The case was reopened. The media buzzed. And for a few days, it felt like 2013 all over again. But the lead fizzled. The gear was too common, its location too ambiguous. The spark of hope was snuffed out, leaving behind an even deeper darkness. Rumors started to ugly whispers on the internet suggesting Garrett had staged the whole thing. Those were investigated and debunked, but not before inflicting another wound on a family already torn apart by silence. 11 years passed. The mountain stood unchanged, its secrets buried under snow and stone. Garrett and Della Beckwith became a local legend, a cautionary tale whispered at trail heads. Their story was one of the great unsolved mysteries of the range. Until, in the late summer of 2024, 2 young climbers, Chloe Vance and Ben Carter, decided to tackle a new, unclimbed line on Mount Hooker. They weren't looking for ghosts. They were chasing their own dreams of first ascents and pushing limits. But the mountain, it seemed, had one last secret to give up. High on the cliff face, while scouting for a place to spend the night, Ben spotted something impossible, a glint of old metal, bolts, not just 1 or 2, but a line of them, leading to a small, shadowed alcove. It was a strange route, more like an escape path than a climb. Curiosity got the better of them. What they found, suspended on that ledge, anchored to the rock by aging straps, wasn't just old gear. It was a time capsule, a blue dry bag, a neatly coiled rope, and a red sleeping bag, zipped almost closed. But this wasn't a forgotten camp. It was something far more chilling. Because when Chloe, her hands trembling, finally managed to unzip that sleeping bag, what she found inside wasn't gear. It was a human skull, staring up at the sky from a pillow of clothes, inside a sleeping bag, on a ledge thousands of feet in the air. The silence that had haunted this case for 11 years suddenly had a location, a vertical grave hanging in the sky. But here's the thing that makes this story even more unbearable. The sleeping bag, the gear, the careful setup, it all pointed to one person trying to keep another safe. It pointed to a desperate act of love. And whoever put that climber to rest, making sure they wouldn't fall, making sure they were secure, they were gone, vanished from that ledge, just like the Beckwiths. So, who was in the sleeping bag? And where, in the name of everything holy, did the person who put them there go? The discovery of Della's remains on that impossible ledge, sent shockwaves through the small climbing community and reignited a mystery that had haunted Wyoming for over a decade. For Detective Isabella Rossi, a 28-year-old investigator new to the cold case unit, the call about a body found on Mount Hooker meant pulling the dustiest file from the archives, the Beckwith case. She'd been a teenager herself when Garrett, 45, and his 19-year-old daughter Della had simply vanished. Now, staring at the initial reports from 2013, she was confronted with the same baffling detail that had stumped investigators for 11 years: 2 perfectly functional satellite phones, left behind in their truck, but now, there was something tangible, something horrifying, suspended on that cliff face, the logistical nightmare of investigating a crime scene. Thousands of feet in the air fell to a specialized team: forensic experts, crime scene technicians, and elite SAR climbers from Grand Teton National Park, assembled under a clear Wyoming sky. The helicopter became a mobile command center as the recovery operation began. What the team found on that tiny, weathered portaledge wasn't just a camp, it was a time capsule of a family's final moments. The gear was meticulously arranged. The blue dry bag contained empty food packets and a nearly depleted first aid kit, and the red sleeping bag was deliberately secured to the platform with careful knots. But it was what was inside that sleeping bag that stopped everyone cold. The skeleton, identified through dental records as Della Beckwith, told a story of terrible misfortune. A forensic anthropologist discovered a catastrophic spiral fracture in her right leg, an injury so severe, it would have rendered her completely immobile. She couldn't have climbed down. She was trapped. This revelation painted a heartbreaking picture. Garrett, the safety-obsessed engineer, had done everything he could. He'd built a secure shelter for his injured daughter, making sure she wouldn't fall from the ledge, and then, wearing his own climbing harness, he'd left. The evidence screamed one thing: he'd gone for help. The question now wasn't what happened to Della, it was where Garrett went. His path, if you could call it that, was marked by a single, desperate clue, found 500 feet below the ledge: an old-style climbing piton hammered into a crack. It was Garrett's gear, vintage and out of place, suggesting a hurried, perhaps panicked, descent. The search team meticulously followed this faint trail, rappelling down treacherous gullies, hoping it would lead to him. For 2 days, they found nothing but rock and silence. On the 3rd day, hope flickered again, then died. The piton led to nowhere. No body, no further gear, no sign that Garrett had survived even a short distance beyond that single anchor point. It was as if he had stepped off the mountain and vanished. Months passed. The official search was called off again, leaving Garrett's fate hanging in the balance. The case file, now updated with Della's confirmed death, sat open but stagnant. Detective Rossi had followed every lead, explored every logical possibility. The mountain, once again, seemed to have one. Then, months later, an entirely unexpected breakthrough came from an unlikely source. A wildlife biologist, flying a drone over a remote, uninhabited basin miles east of Mount Hooker for a sheep migration study, spotted a flash of faded blue fabric. Upon closer inspection, the drone's camera revealed tattered clothing and, disturbingly, scattered white bones at the base of a sheer cliff. The location was bizarre, completely off any logical route a climber would take, but the biologist knew the story. He contacted the sheriff's office immediately. Detective Rossi felt that now familiar surge of adrenaline. The recovery team, lowered into the desolate basin by helicopter, faced a grim scene. The elements had scattered Garrett's remains across the rocky ground. Identification seemed impossible until a team member found a small, bent piece of titanium metal. It was a medical plate, the kind used in jaw surgery. Rossi remembered a detail from Garrett's wife, Marianne's original interview. Garrett had broken his jaw years ago in a cycling accident and had surgery. Dental and medical records were rushed to the scene. The plate matched perfectly. After 11 years, Garrett Beckwith was found, but his location told its own tragic story. He hadn't fallen on a climbing route. He had become profoundly lost, wandering miles from where he should have been, ending up in an escapeless basin where he ultimately met his end. The official conclusion was one of cascading tragedies, a story of love, desperation, and the brutal indifference of nature. The mystery was largely solved. Della died on the ledge, trapped by her injuries. Garrett died alone, lost while trying to save her. Marianne Beckwith, who had endured over a decade of not knowing, could finally lay her family to rest. But for all the answers found, one fundamental question remained, echoing louder than ever, a haunting detail that no amount of investigation could resolve. Why were those satellite phones left in the truck? Garrett was known for his meticulous planning, his obsession with safety protocols. Leaving the very devices designed to call for help behind defied everything about who he was. Was it a moment of inexplicable human error, a fatal oversight by an otherwise perfect planner? Or was there another reason, something that happened at the trailhead that day, a reason that died with Garrett and Della? The mountain had given up its victims, but it kept that one crucial secret buried deep within its granite heart. That unanswered question, that single inexplicable act, became the final, torturous piece of the puzzle, the silent mistake that transformed an ambitious climb into an 11-year mystery and ultimately, a double tragedy. The question about the phones haunted everyone who followed the story, but for Marianne Beckwith, it was the final, torturous whisper in a decade-long scream of silence. She had her family back, but that one, fundamental piece of the puzzle remained just out of reach, buried perhaps with the secrets of that dusty truck and the mountain itself. Detective Rossi often found herself staring at that detail in her final report. The simple fact that two experienced climbers, who lived and breathed safety protocols, had left behind the very tools that could have changed everything. It defied logic, defied Garrett's character, as Marianne and Alistair had described it. It was the single detail that made the whole tragedy feel even more senseless. A fatal flaw in an otherwise desperate story of love and survival. For years, after the burials, the story of Garrett and Della Beckwith settled into the folklore of the Wind River Range. It became a cautionary tale. Yes, but also a testament to a father's love and the brutal, unforgiving power of nature. Climbers at trailheads would still whisper about the meticulous planner who made one catastrophic mistake, about the daughter who waited on a ledge, and about the mountain that gave up its secrets only after years had passed. The Beckwith case, file, now officially closed, sits in the Fremont County Archives, a thick testament to one of Wyoming's most baffling and heartbreaking mysteries. Marianne Beckwith eventually moved away from Lander, unable to stay in the house filled with too many memories and the lingering echo of that unanswered phone call. She donated Garrett's climbing gear to a local youth program and kept only a few personal items, including his worn guidebook and a photo of the three of them hiking, smiling on a trail long before Mount Hooker. She never remarried, never had more children, but she found a quiet peace in knowing the truth, however painful it was. In her final interview about the case, she spoke simply, "I'd rather know the worst truth than live with the hope of a lie." The mystery of the satellite phones, however, remains unsolved. It's the one thread that no amount of investigation, no amount of forensic reconstruction, could ever fully tie off. Perhaps it was a moment of inexplicable human error, a lapse, so profound it defies understanding. Perhaps there was something at the trailhead that day, a reason Garrett felt he couldn't take them, a reason that died with him in that remote basin. The mountain, vast and indifferent, keeps that secret still. 11 years after two climbers vanished into the Wind River Range. Their story finally reached its end, not with a dramatic rescue or a shocking revelation, but with the quiet discovery of a skull on a forgotten ledge and the scattered bones in a distant, desolate basin. It was a resolution born not of heroism, but of persistence, of two young climbers who happened to look in the right place at the right time, and of a detective who refused to let an old mystery rest. Garrett and Della Beckwith's final adventure wasn't the triumphant climb they'd planned, but a testament to love, desperation, and the cruel, beautiful indifference of the wilderness they loved so much. Their story reminds us that even the most meticulous plans can crumble, that the mountains demand respect, and that sometimes the most important questions are the ones that remain forever unanswered.